I can't remember his name though.
Who? Which one?
We were talking about the guy who found. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were talking about the guy who found the T-Rex blood, and they.
The woman. Yeah.
Oh no, it was a Triceratops recently from Washington, I believe where it was.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I think it's the Triceratops person, because a couple people found so-called T-Rex blood, and I haven't heard anything about that.
May I comment?
It's an open mic.
Go for it.
I'm sorry, I'm eating. But I wish I could remember the guy's name recently. It's been about a year since he found this soft tissue in Triceratops.
Hey, in the Hangout, you just got to take the mic when you want to. If you want to talk, just go for it.
Well,
what do you guys feel
I was saying before. I'm sorry.
as soon as okay. No, go ahead. It's fine.
I was just gonna say what we were talking about when you were getting coffee was just the reason why they sweep that evidence about the geologic column and the geography. The reason they sweep that under the rug is kind of for the same reason they sweep the cure for cancer under the rug, even though they have it. It's because of money.
So, like, medical science is like.
I'm skeptical about the idea that they found a cure for cancer.
Yeah, that's a little. I'm with Neph on that one. It seems kind of dubious that medical science and geologic science together are like, hey, for some reason we need to hide the cure for cancer from people, and we need to hide the fact that the Earth is not billions
because they would
old.
because they would never do that to anyone. They're good people. Anyway.
Well, no, it's just you're putting together like hundreds of millions of people, and like assuming they're all able to like collude on some nefarious.
Well, you know what? If they are hiding the cure for cancer, and it came out and released, the pharmaceutical companies will lose billions of dollars, and a lot of doctors who are in the medical field of researching cancer will lose their job. Just saying.
I mean, there's lots of different cancers. Are you saying just like a cure against the concept of cancer, or like
they got a cure for every single disease we come up against?
I don't think so myself.
Yeah, Evan, you and I could agree on that. It just seems.
Well, I was gonna say, can we get back on subject?
Yeah, good call. What do you guys think about? I was looking up. A lot of people who argue against the global flood are actually Christians who think that it was actually a local flood. And I'm interested in what you guys think about the idea of the Genesis flood actually being local instead of global.
It can't be.
The Bible directly talks about. Well, the Bible directly says that it covered the face of the whole earth, doesn't it? Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that too. That's why it seems kind of.
That just contradicts what they're saying. Just like the serpent in the garden, he was like, "Hath God said?" And then she said, "God told her to tend this," and then the serpent just said, "You shall not surely die." So it was a direct denial of what God said, and that's exactly what you see with this community.
So I want to share a picture with you. This is one of many boulders found like this in the side of a hill or a mountain, and you can see that this boulder here, this rock, when the strata formed, they formed around it. Now, rock doesn't bend, and there is a fault right here. You can see, and it has moved a little bit. Okay, it has moved a little bit.
What about slicking sides?
But very big, very little. And it did not, the movement of the fault did not cause the the curve of the strata around
it doesn't look like that.
Right. So what has happened here is this boulder was in place, the strata were forming already. The boulder got washed into place by moving water, and the strata formed around it, you see. Now, that's not going to happen over massive periods of time. That's a rapid deposition there.
You know, it sounds like you definitely correctly explained what happened here. Definitely. I'm interested in what do you think about slick insides, though?
About what?
Slick insides. It's where imagine you have a phone book, and if you have a phone book, and if you like twist a phone book, you could see all the pages in the phone book. They twist and they curve and stuff. Um, very, very minutely in the phone book, that twist and curve generates heat. And when you have a lot of layers on top of each other, and you have that kind of heat and pressure, you can actually have like S shapes in strata formed in solid rock. And
And
because of the pressure, you can get crazy curves like that. Look up slick insides. I'll type it in the side for you.
But heat, the strata of the Earth were formed in water, and so that's a natural coolant. There wouldn't have been a massive amount of heat while strata were formed.
Exactly. What you would see is you would see a lot of like brittle cracks, but you don't see that in slick insides.
Well, I mean, there are always going to be exceptions, you know. But I'm talking about the majority of the geologic column is strata which formed by moving water. Almost.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing I wanted to ask you.
There is always going to be inclusions, you know, things like salt inclusion or volcanic material that got buried in on top of sediments and then buried and then buried by further sediments. You know, there's always exceptions. The geology of the Earth is not completely uniform. So.
Well, there's two things there. The salt is actually, I think, a big issue for younger creationists because you'll have meters thick of salt in the middle of strata all over the world. There's the Salinas salt that's part of central Michigan. You'll also have salt in Europe, and I believe also down in Texas where the Gulf of Mexico is. There's all these layers in the middle of the strata of salt, and if there was a worldwide flood, that salt would have dissolved.
It would have?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, salt's water soluble, right?
Yeah, but if you have a massive dump of salt coming out of the earth, and you know it's in rock form already, why would it dissolve if it's buried in a period of just 1 year? You know, and
Why would salt?
sediments are building on it by feet a day, right?
Sure. Why would you have salt? Well, you would actually have that salt would dissolve. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but how much? What percent?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, what percent? Let's say you have a massive amount of salt come out on the earth in rock form, and you have a million tons of salt come out from inside the earth in rock form and collects in a particular location. And it's buried under sediments at a rate of several feet a day.
Yeah.
Why do you think that it had to have all eroded away? What maybe if it was if it was a million tons of salt, what you might end up with is 200,000 tons of salt left after water took away some percentage of it. So that really doesn't explain. There's no reason for me to believe that water should have eroded all of it. You see what I mean? After all, the sedimentation is burying things, right? So as it's being eroded, it's also being buried.
Yeah. See, underwater, the only way you can not have salt eroded underwater is through, I forget the name of the guy, but there's a special type of action that occurs where
I'm not saying erosion didn't occur, but you're not giving me a reason to believe all of it.
Well, I'm trying to give it to you right now. Sorry if I'm talking too slow for you. The thing is that, yeah, underwater, if you have salt forming in sedimentary layers underwater, it's going to dissolve. The only way that you can't have it dissolve underwater, which is what the deposition, it all occurred underwater, which is what you mentioned, is through, I forget the name of the guy, but there's a special type of reaction. And that's when you have two different volumes at two different, I believe, speeds of salt coming together, where salt can be laid down underwater in the type of in the way that we see it all around the world. The only issue with that is that you would see a bunch of other impurities in that salt. You would see a bunch of mud, and it would obviously look like it was laid down really quickly. That's not what we're seeing in all this salt around the world. And not just salt, by the way, anything that's water soluble.
And if that salt came out in rock form, then I don't see any reason why it should be filled with impurities.
Well, the issue is that this is all the salt that I'm talking about comes with a lot of detritus, and it comes with a lot of material that's associated with evaporites, and so it's obvious that this is salt coming from inland seas that occurred.
And now you just
various
moved the
times
goalpost to evaporites. That evaporites don't explain massive salt deposits that are found throughout the geologic column.
No, it's included in all these salt deposits. I'm sorry if you thought I was moving the goalpost.
So, yeah, but I mean, we're talking about massive salt deposits. That's not related to evaporites.
There's evaporites related to the salt deposits that I brought up. Remember, I mentioned there's salt.
Yeah, but I mentioned massive salt deposits, and evaporites don't explain those.
Okay, well, the salt deposits that I mentioned, which are in central Michigan, they're also located in near the Gulf of Mexico and Texas, and also in Europe. Those do come with detritus and evaporites, all examples of salt coming from an inland sea. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
I don't have any problem with salt, with the existence of evaporites, but I will say that some of what are called evaporites are probably no such thing as an evaporite. However, that doesn't address what I was discussing. I was discussing large salt deposits, and those are not created by evaporites.
Oh, you're just talking about, yeah, there certainly are large salt deposits, like you said, that aren't created in the way that I'm talking about.
That's right.
But those
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the reason why I'm not talking about that is because that's not relevant to the arguments that I'm using.
Well, that's the argument.
Hey, Joe, can I ask a question? Or Joe, your name?
Sure, please. Yeah.
I don't know who all's in this thing. I just see a bunch of people coming on this thing. But you believe in God?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure. So you are an atheist?
Yes. Okay. But the arguments I'm using actually do come from someone who does believe in God.
There are a lot of legitimate arguments atheists make, but at the bottom of the day, do you believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God?
No.
Well, that means you have the spirit of Antichrist.
Sure, why not? But I believe that's kind of irrelevant to whether or not a global flood occurred, because plenty of Christians disagree that a global flood occurred. I think that attacking me personally... I'm sorry?
That doesn't make them right.
Well, sure, yeah, but Neph, you agree that me being an atheist doesn't have anything to do with what we're arguing, right? We're just talking about science.
Well, I think you're in here arguing because you don't want to believe in God, but that's a side issue.
Well, like I said, a bunch of people who are Christians disagree.
Irrelevant.
Yeah, it doesn't, just because there's Christians that tap
so it shouldn't matter if I'm an atheist or not.
Doesn't necessarily mean that makes it right, though. I think the point is that objection doesn't make it true just because there's Christians that have an agreement that happens to fall in line with you. I think that's what Nep's trying to say.
No, definitely, and I agree. That's the point I'm making. It doesn't matter whether
what is the core reason why you don't believe in God?
I mean, do you guys want to go down that road? I think
that's the road. That's the road that you're trying to go down here, obviously, unless you're just trying to.
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, the Hangout's primarily about geology.
Exactly. Right. I mean, I can talk.
But the whole point of through the geology. What is it? All right. What is it about geology that causes you to believe in atheist, to believe that there is no God?
Geology doesn't lead me to believe that there is no God.
Well, then are you just here to argue with everyone?
No, I have a geology minor, and so I think that when people try to say that, well, you have... when people try to link geology with the concept of God, I want to talk about geology. I'm sorry if you guys really actually want to talk about God versus atheism.
Well,
But
I mean, I'm just trying to say, do you believe in a supernatural God?
someone was coughing, but I think you asked, do I believe in the supernatural or something?
Sure.
And again, yeah, this is your room. If you wanna go down this road, I'm fine. I'm not sure why it's relevant to theology.
Joe, hey Joe, I'd like to say something real quick. A little while ago, you just said that this is why the young Earth creationists have a problem, and then you went on with quite a bit about the geology, and you are talking geology, but after saying something like that, it's to me whether you're here trying to convince everyone to not believe in God, you certainly
I'm
seem
not.
here. Hold on though. You certainly seem here to be showing people that the evidence of geology refutes young Earth creationism, and therefore pretty much refutes
Definitely.
everyone's belief in this room right now. So I don't know. Maybe there's some not a young Earth creationist in here, but I don't know. That's what I heard you say, so I'm just bringing that up.
Yeah, but it doesn't refute God. Go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
Here's I'm going to show you another boulder like the one I showed you a moment ago. Here's a man standing on the side of a mountain, and you can see the clear stratification of the mountain is comprised of strata. And now here's a very rectangular-looking boulder, by the way.
So is my point that I brought up earlier going to be shoved under the rug because you guys wanted
No, you
to
tried to move
talk
the
about atheism?
goalpost to
I didn't. They started asking me if I was a believer or not.
Well, I think I addressed it, and I said if I'm talking about rock salt that came out of the earth.
But it was a point I brought up.
In rock form, there's no reason to believe that all of it should erode away because it's salt. But here you see another boulder where we can see the strata formed around the boulder in place. Right?
But that's a different type of salt.
This boulder was was moved here by water. You can see how it's sunk down into and deformed the strata, its weight. That's about a 2 or 3 ton stone right there, maybe more. And,
salt also dissolves instantly.
We'll go back to salt if you want. Rock salt doesn't dissolve instantly.
That's not the salt I'm talking about. I don't know how many times I've listened to that.
There's a guy. I'm sorry.
Hold on. So these strata then buried this boulder. Now, the uniformitarianist believes that these strata, remember, they formed over vast geologic time. They would say that this strata down here is probably many thousands of years older than the one above. Probably tens of thousands of years older. Like how
it depends on what kind of rock it is.
This is buried in an awful lot of stratum. Now, the interesting thing about this rock is, look at the corners of it. You see how sharply those corners are? Look at these corners.
What kind of rock is that? Where is that?
I don't know what type of rock it is.
That's kind of important, is it not?
Well, yes and no. If I finish my point, you'll see why.
Sorry, go ahead.
The point is, this boulder has extremely fine corners. It's an unusual stone because it forms so rectangular, but nonetheless, you see how sharp these corners are, right? Now, some of the problem is rock is not going to sit on the earth, being eroded. Well, if these deposits, the strata, were laid down over vast geologic time, and you've got this one and this one down here, and this one down here is 100,000 years or 15,000 or 20,000 years older than these above, then that means that while this rock was exposed here, you got many thousands of years between the strata it's sitting on and the one it's buried in. Now, I don't know about you, but I just don't believe rock is going to retain its natural curved surface over that many thousands of years of erosion. And I'm going to give you a piece of evidence that's true. Let me show you something.
But, can I respond to that? You mentioned I'm not pretty big...
Hold on.
Okay.
What is the name of that? I've forgotten the name of it. That Egyptian creature statue that was made. It looks like
the Sphinx.
Sphinx, yes. Okay, let's take a look at the Sphinx.
Yeah, the erosion of the Sphinx, especially in a desert climate.
Okay, now here's the Sphinx. Let's take a look at it.
Hey T, you gotta mute yourself.
Okay. I don't know if I'm
Can you guys hear me?
capturing the right one. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wrong screen. Okay.
I can't hear you. Just joking.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me try here again. Shoot. Okay, I have to get rid of another window. Google screen sharing is very iffy and dumb. Doesn't work so good. All right, now let me try again. Now remember what I said about, there we go. No? Yes, now I get that. Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
I see it.
here's the Sphinx. It was carved out of sedimentary materials. And this thing was once covered with a smooth surface all around the outside. It was probably glossy. It was so smooth and covered with mortar. As you can clearly see, it has eroded like crap. Now that's the Sphinx. Why was the Sphinx so heavily eroded? And that boulder I showed you, which was covered over a period of tens of thousands of years likely, according to uniformitarianism, why did it not erode? Why are its corners still so very short?
Awesome. A question I can answer. Okay, good. Let me answer that. The Sphinx, you're right, it has eroded terribly. That's definitely an example of what erosion would look like over a long period of time. The thing with the boulder that you showed, the inclusion, the xenolith, not a xenolith, I'm sorry, just the boulder inclusion with the hard edges. The thing is, when I asked you, and this is why I think this is what was important, I asked you where that was and what kind of material that was. And you, if you could find that out, I would be interested in knowing. The difference is that geologists don't say that sedimentation can happen very rapidly. They don't say that's not true, that doesn't happen.
Can I just say something, by the way?
That rock is quartzite.
You said, I'm sorry, I'll let you finish, but you said that if he found something, you'd be interested in finding. That's a bald-faced lie. You would not even be interested. No matter how much proof that is shown to atheists, they're not interested.
Okay, so now that he is done poisoning the well, dang it, I forgot my point.
The rock is quartzite. Joe.
Sure. The rock itself that was included?
That rock is quartzite.
What about the layers around it? Because that seems to be the bigger issue, right? Because how can those layers happen over thousands of years?
Without the rock eroding around it, yeah.
Definitely. The thing is that sedimentation happens very rapidly all the time. It happens on the coasts of America. Yeah. When you said that they were thousands of years apart, you said that that's what uniform. That it would be really important to know if that's actually the case for the picture that you showed. Is that what they said?
I think that's an important thing that you just hit on, that if you agree that sedimentation can fall at a rapid rate, then how are you going to differentiate between it happening at a rapid rate and it taking a long time for these layers to come down?
Awesome, true empiricism. Very good point. Very good point. One of the ways that you can show that is that some sedimentary layers are laid down in different ways. Like Ordovician sedimentary layers, a lot of them are laid down through metamorphic processes. And so you'll see on the edges of certain layers of rock, you'll see obvious examples of this rock going underneath intense heat, almost reaching metamorphic levels. And so you'll see like pebbles, you'll see the material it looks clearly heated up. And then all of a sudden you'll have like sandstone or something right on top of it, or shale right on top of it. And none of that metamorphic evidence is on that shale, on that sandstone. So it's clear that this was laid down at a time well after the previous level was laid down, because if it was laid down rapidly right on top of that previous Ordovician level with the metamorphic rock pebbles and stuff, you would also see the same type of intense heat signature on the edge of the shale. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, nonsense. Water sedimentation takes place in water, which is the natural coolant.
Oh, that's sedimentation, but I just mentioned metamorphic.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of controversy about metamorphic rocks. In fact, it's not even proven that any rock in this planet is metamorphic. Did you know that? I know that you think that the secular geologists have this idea all wrapped up, and the idea of metamorphic rock is proven. It's not proven. What they have is an idea of how it was formed, metamorphosis. They haven't proven that rock is metamorphic. I'm going to argue with you that metamorphic rock probably doesn't even exist. It was formed by what you might call, or rather, not that it doesn't exist, but that a lot of rock that's claimed to be metamorphic is probably not metamorphic. And the reason that some secular geologists often argue is this is metamorphic, is because if it happened during the flood of Noah, it can't be metamorphic. See, that's the problem.
I see. Well, if you have a problem with the title metamorphic, that's fine. What you still haven't addressed is the fact that this layer of rock has a heated top. It has pebbles that show signs that it was heated to a very high and extreme level. And this isn't at all found.
Tell me what shows that it was that strata in which that rock was laying?
You can't fight against God forever.
Extreme heat.
Wait.
What shows? What Joe? What shows that the strata, which you're saying the strata on top of that rock that buried it, were under extreme heat?
Yeah, you can see that one layer of strata has like a line that clearly demonstrates that it went under extreme heat. If you don't want to accept metamorph, I'm sorry.
How so? How does it demonstrate that it was subjected to extreme heat?
Like it has signatures of like being burnt and stuff. Like what scientists can do is they can go into a laboratory and put rocks under extreme heat and see what the rocks look like after that extreme heat.
Okay.
They go, this is what it looks like under extreme heat. They go out to nature and they see, wow, there's this layer of rocks that look exactly like what they would look like if they were under extreme heat. And then all of a sudden you have this layer of sandstone or of mudstone or of shale or of whatever that's right on top of it. Something that just could not form at the same time as this one layer of rock that went underneath.
Great. So here's what happened, Joe.
Can I finish my thought really quickly and then you can go ahead and respond if that's okay? Thank you. Okay, so you have this layer that went underneath extreme heat. It shows all the signs that it went underneath extreme heat. And then you have a layer that clearly didn't undergo extreme heat right on top of that layer. Now, the reason why this is important is that it implies that the bottom layer had to have cooled. It had to have cooled enough so that when you put the top layer on that bottom layer, it wouldn't have been affected by the same amounts of extreme heat that the bottom layer affected. If you don't want to accept metamorphic rock, I don't know exactly how to argue against that. I mean, if you won't accept it, I don't see a reason why I should argue for it for you. But the clear point is that this stuff was extremely heated, and then it cooled, and then the layer was put on top.
Well, built into what you said is the rebuttal to your own argument. Your argument actually shoots itself in the foot. And the reason it does is because there's a clear, distinct boundary between these two strata. Okay, that's the thing. That's produced by moving water. That's a hydrologic fact. So,
but I just explained that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that means that the strata that you're claiming was subjected to extreme heat was not subjected to extreme heat. The materials in it may have been transported from one place on the earth where they were subjected to extreme heat during the flood of Noah and deposited where they are after they had been subjected to extreme heat, formed in a strata, and the strata above it formed almost at the same time right above it. The proof of this is the clear, distinct boundaries between those strata, because you don't get clear, distinct boundaries over long deposition, Joe. That's so the rebuttal for your argument is built right into your own argument. It can't be.
Yeah, but that seems to have a problem for your argument against
let me finish.
strata with salt, because salt falls
now you're moving the goalpost, Joe.
No, I'm not. I'm
what kind of salt
wrong, and now everyone's going to jump on me about how I need to believe in God.
Joe, I want to finish what I'm saying.
Sure, go ahead.
The rebuttal to your argument was built right into it, and you said clear boundary. You didn't say clear boundary, but you clear demarcation. You alluded that you can see clearly that one strata ends and another begins immediately upon it. Okay, so now the problem is that strata form one on top of the other virtually at the same time. There's no geologic age between them. That's the problem for you. That means that one strata...
Oh, that's your contention.
No, that's a fact, Joe. That's a geologic fact. I've provided in the beginning of this Hangout 24 science papers from the journals that demonstrate that it's been observed that...
Only 24?
Yeah, I could probably find 3 million if you like, Joe. Does that satisfy you? Would 300 billion do it for you? What about 3 trillion, zillion, cajillion? Would that do it for you, Joe? No, sorry, you won't.
No, actually, 300 billion.
Let me finish. It wouldn't matter how many I provide. I only need one.
I just disagreed with you. But go.
So I only need one. So the problem, Joe, is that I want to make sure you understand my argument. The clear, distinct boundary between the two strata proves there is no geologic time in between them. And because that's so, that means your idea that the one strata being subjected to extreme heat and then another came along and was deposited later is false.
But you just, I mean, it had to have done, I mean, I explained why it had to have
you explained that the materials in that strata show the sign of having been subjected.
I just want to be clear, you guys all hear him interrupting me whenever I respond.
Joe,
right?
Here's the problem, Joe. You don't care about what evidence. You care about what you believe. And Joe,
I see. I just gave...
Joe, that you argue that the whole strata, where it is in situ, was subjected to extreme heat.
I gave you an argument.
And I'm telling you that the materials in that strata were subjected to extreme heat and deposited where they are after they had been subjected to extreme heat. And the proof of that...
can I respond to that, please?
And the proof of that is that the one strata forms on top of the other without geologic time in between them. Therefore, your argument is false because these two strata, one of them which you claim was subjected to extreme heat as it is in situ, was not deposited at a different age and time from the one above it. And the absence of erosion between them and the absence of gradation from one of them into the other is proof that there is no geologic time in between them. And so your argument falls flat on its face.
Okay, can I respond now? Okay, so my response is that the fact that, to say that you can't have salt dissolved and taken away, would you let me finish my, I knew you were
your response to this strata, which you claim...
Let me explain, let me give you the response before, okay.
Move the goalpost, Joe.
Everyone, it's clear that he is interrupting me because he knows the force of my argument.
Joe,
and
you said you
can... Well, I'm actually interested in hearing...
Well, he can say it, but listen, Joe. You're making an argument. You said you were going to give a rebuttal.
You don't even know what argument I'm going to make.
Joe, you said you were going to give a rebuttal to what I just said about...
I am, but you won't let me.
Joe, you said you would give a rebuttal to the argument I just made about that boulder in that strata, which you have not examined.
Wait a minute. I've asked you for the information on that, and you won't give it to me.
And then, Joe... Instead of doing that, you're off talking about salt again. Where's the rebuttal to the argument I made about that boulder in those strata?
Well, wait a minute. I thought we were talking about the sign of clear clear like high temperatures in between.
No,
I
you're
thought we were
talking
talking.
about temperatures. I just rebutted your argument. You said you were going
And
to.
I'm responding to your
No,
rebuttal.
you're talking
Why
about
can't I
salt
respond to your rebuttal?
because that's not related to this boulder in strata.
Okay, so I just want to. I mean, if you're gonna, I mean, if your response to me telling you you're wrong is to go back to talking about a topic that you brought up
No, it's the
20
same
minutes
boulder.
ago and act as if that's not.
So you said you were
I
going
mean,
to
that's very
rebut what I just
disingenuous,
said.
Neph.
You
It's
said
very
you were,
disingenuous on your
Joe, you
part.
said you were going to rebut what I just said about that boulder in
But
those
you won't
strata.
let me.
No,
Okay,
you're
well,
talking about salt. Are you going to rebut what I said, or are you going to talk about salt?
okay, what I mentioned about that boulder, which I guess you didn't hear earlier when we were talking about it, is that geologists have no problems with sedimentation being laid down rapidly in certain circumstances. The way you figure out whether or not it's a specific circumstance, what occurred, is you find out what the layers were made. You know what the boulder is made out of. You know it's made out of quartz, which is what you mentioned. But you
Quartzite.
haven't told me what the sedimentary layers around it are made out of, nor have you told me where it occurred, which is very important to answer that question.
It would
But
be
I
in
mean,
uniformitarian.
but the
It's not, Joe, because the strata have a clear, distinct boundary. So your idea, it doesn't hold any water. There's
okay,
no geologic
strata.
time between them.
Exactly, because it's perfectly fine in geology for some strata to be laid down rapidly.
Hmm.
I told you that already.
Right. So where's the erosion between them, and where's the gradient?
Okay, and then I brought up, I mean, it's like we're summarizing what just happened over 20 minutes, and then I brought up, because someone else
Okay.
asked about it, I brought up the fact that there are layers where it's clear that they were laid down at different times. And I brought up the fact that there are layers that show rock that was heated up to extreme levels of heat. You can see it in the rock. You can see it. Oh, you can see
But
it
even
in
that
the.
doesn't necessarily prove anything, though. Even if you're going to try to say that there are certain patterns that were heated, I mean, anything could explain that. A comet could have came in. There could have been some sort of environmental factor with the heat of the Earth. There could have been all sorts of things that could explain the same thing. So you don't really have a way to differentiate between these layers coming down fast or as to whether or not they're heated. It seems to me like what you're really offering is conjectural.
No, because like I said, scientists have went into the lab and seen what rock looks like when you put it up to extreme heat.
And I explained that rock was subjected to heat somewhere else and deposited here.
Every time you interrupt me, I'm going to take that as you knowing you're wrong. That's what I've decided.
I just want you to, if you're going to rebut me, you need to stay on topic.
True empiricism, am I going off topic?
I think that he has answered you. I don't really see where it is that you're like arguing from, Joe, and that's just the honest truth. I mean,
the
thing also is that no matter how much.
Oh, I'm an atheist, so I'm not going to take evidence. Okay, you got me there.
No, I was going to say that you don't believe in a supernatural realm either way. So
okay.
Every single piece of proof that he gives you is going to be. I mean, do you think that?
Here's the proof he gave me. He showed me a picture of a rock, and he hasn't been able to. He said it layered in sedimentary strata. He doesn't even know where it's from. He just went and found a picture on a creationist website in order to.
No, it's not on a creationist website. But
you should be embarrassed.
Joe, the point of what I made when I brought up this boulder was the edginess of it, its sharp edges.
And I answered you already.
Which proved that it cannot have been subjected to the environment of the surface of the Earth for thousands of years. It would have eroded.
Okay, what was my answer to you saying that?
And I said, then this demonstrates that this boulder was buried rapidly in all of these strata. Now, or do you agree that it was buried rapidly?
Okay, I told you, this is going to be like the 5th time I've said this. I told you that this is a natural process, that sedimentary layers can be laid down quickly, and, I mean, I don't know, I mean, to say that that extends to every single rock layer around the world is asinine. And the reason why it's asinine is the example I gave, which you apparently like don't want to respond to, which is kind of telling.
Okay, so in relation to this boulder, then you would agree with me, my premise.
I already did. This is going to be the
boulder
5th time that I've
was
agreed with you.
Okay, good. So we agree on that. You acknowledge that this boulder was buried rapidly, and that was my point.
Okay, so, and then I said that to extend that to every single geologic process around the globe doesn't make sense because, and then I mentioned the Ordovician layer showing a clear example that was heated up, and I mentioned that that heated up layer had to have had time to cool down in order for another layer to go on, a layer that wasn't affected by that heat. And your response to that was, well, that could have been deposited by a giant flood. It could have happened at another time, deposited at a giant flood, and then the other layer could have landed on top of that. And I was going to bring up, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, if you're going to look at it from the standpoint of a creationist, then of course, I mean, it could make sense from a creationist standpoint because the Bible talks about how the fountains of the deep, they broke open. So there could have been all sorts of geological events that were taking place with magma, and you have the heat and you have the water cooling it down. So you have what you need from a biblical accounts to explain that heat and to explain the cooling of the layers.
Well, the issue with that is that when you have cooling underneath water, which Neph mentioned earlier that water it helps a lot with the cooling down of the temperature of something. The issue with that is that when you have something cooled down rapidly under like a aqueous-like setting, you're going to have cracks, you're going to have a signature. You're going to be able to see that occurred, but we don't see that in these rock layers that I'm talking about.
So Joe, how long do you think it took?
Every time I bring it up, I get
well, let's get some details out of you. How long do you think it took to cool down that strata before the next one was deposited on top of it?
I mean, I'm not sure. It had to have been like an amount of time for that strata. I mean, it depends on where it is. Well, this is why it's important to know about these specific places.
Well, how much time?
It depends on where it is. It depends on what the strata on top is laid down.
Well, how much time could it have been, Joe?
It depends. I mean, it could have been a couple of days. It could have been thousands of years. It depends.
Thousands of years? No.
It could have been. Why not?
No, but because I'll say it again. Because we have a clear, distinct boundary.
By the way, I was finally getting to my point, and you interrupted me. I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that.
Joe, because we have a clear, distinct. Well, you're making claims, and then you want to bypass them. You say that it took time for that one to cool, and the next one deposited on top of it is somehow squeezed in there, evidence of uniformitarianism, and that's what I'm trying to address now. The problem for you, again, I'll say it, this is about the 9th time I've said so.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'll write it down, too.
The fact that we have a clear, distinct boundary between them demonstrates there is no geologic time between them.
But that goes against what flood layers actually look like if you look into geologic.
No. Flooding produces.
I'm going to send you some paleo flood articles so you can see what flood layers
here on the screen. This is I don't know if you've seen this video before, Joe, but this is a PhD turns from atheism to Christ on this.
Like in the video, that would be kind of neat. If like halfway through the video, he's like, "Wait a minute."
Joe, are you saying that strata can be laid down, and then over a period of thousands of years there will be no? Are you saying that you're acknowledging that a strata requires rapid deposition? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that?
It depends on which strata, it depends on which location in the Earth, and it depends on what processes are involved.
What process can create a strata over thousands of years?
What is it in a?
May I have a suggestion? Sorry.
Okay, in a arid desert-like setting, you have lots of sandstone deposited over time. Also, in the setting where I was going to bring, when I bring up the salt thing, it's not water, Joe. In an arid-like area where you have a deposit, where you have where you have wind action. Over time, things can be laid down. It makes more sense because if it was laid down immediately afterwards, it would have the same type of extreme heat signatures that we see on layers below.
Joe, do you know that sandstone forms because of mineralized water? It doesn't form. Dry sand will never make a stone.
Okay, and the other way is through salt deposits where you have several...
Wait. Let's address this thing you said about sandstone.
Okay, I messed up about sandstone. My bad, Evan.
Okay, right.
Got me there, even though you don't know what slick and sides are.
Right,
But anyways...
So sandstone requires mineralized water. Okay, so back to my question. Can you give me an example of a strata that is capable of forming over thousands of years?
Yes, the several meters of salt deposits found all over the world.
Okay, I explained how salt can form.
You explained how a certain type of salt can form, but not this type of salt that I'm talking about.
Salt does not constitute a strata. Salt is.
I'm sorry?
Salt does not constitute a strata.
Okay, there's several. No, this is the thing, and we're talking about geologic time, how uniformitarianism could show that geologic time occurred. When you have several meters of salt all around the world, not the salt rock deposits that you're talking about, not salt pluming up from underneath the ground. I'm talking about places in central Michigan, places near the Mediterranean, places near the, I want to say the Alps, but I might be thinking of something else.
And how do you know places over thousands of years?
Because salt is water soluble. It immediately gets dissolved by water. It could not have been laid down through the type of
Okay, so where is this salt? Is it down in the geologic?
The Salinas salt. Yes, look up the Salinas salt. It's in central Michigan.
Is it how deeply is it in the earth? How deep?
It's about over half a kilometer.
Half a kilometer deep. Okay, and so how does this half a kilometer deep salt demonstrate that it was formed over thousands of years?
Because salt is water soluble.
I addressed the salt deposit.
Salt couldn't coat. Okay.
Salt
can
rock.
Can I answer? Okay, everyone.
Salt. Are you saying that salt?
Is he interrupting me every time I'm about to answer him?
Joe, we're trying.
No.
I'm trying to keep you
not.
on.
Okay,
No.
I must be crazy then. Sorry,
hey, I just want to say, he, the guy with the red cross. Just what I want to tell you, 2 Peter 3, man.
And Joe, I'm
Peter 3.
trying to keep you on point. You said salt.
Freaking philosophers.
Salt requires salt can't form that way. I'm saying salt rock doesn't erode. Just all
Everyone,
at once. It doesn't.
To be clear, he keeps on wanting to talk about a different type of salt that I'm talking about.
You're talking about salt mixed with other materials, not solid salt, right?
Why don't you let me tell you what I'm talking about instead of just talking over me? I'm talking. The Salinas salt deposit is mixed with detritus and other clear examples of what you would find in an inland sea. It's also found with fully formed coral.
Okay, so that can
coral,
be. Why couldn't that be created by the flood, Joe?
Because it's fully formed coral in a ring around the Salinas salt. That would have been destroyed in the immediate flood, especially in a especially in a flood that would move entire beds of rock strata that you said was moved underneath sandstone and mudstone in my example earlier. If that can happen, then we wouldn't be able to see the type of coral formation and the type of coral that are fan coral that are not disturbed. We wouldn't have a layer of whole bunch of sedimentation laid down rapidly, and then one layer where salt was able to slowly collect with evaporite, then with other microfossils that are associated with the sea, and with fully formed coral reefs. And then layers of more strata.
Okay, so
that shows the geologic time, and the fact that salt wasn't dissolved in a worldwide deluge. I'm sorry,
Do you know how many
So let
hundreds
me-
of thousands of brine is released into the sea and Antarctica every year during wintertime? There's hundreds of thousands of tons of brine that get released into the ocean floor, and that doesn't usually surface till a long time afterwards.
And
So there
Yeah,
is
I
a
know what you're
port
talking about,
of salt in the ocean at the ocean floor that
Mhm.
you know that can be used here at the same time. If you get what I'm saying.
there's also another.
I can answer that, but Neff's going to interrupt me and not let me answer it. So.
There's another possibility, and that is that during the flood of Noah, uh, salt and coral were moved, transported from one place to another, and deposited. That there's no reason in the world that can't happen during the flood. So as it's I think evolutionists, uniformitarianists have this false understanding about the flood, or false idea about the flood, is that it would have mixed everything up so evenly, but that's not true. Remember, as the flood is
That's not what I said, by the way.
the flood originated from the mid-oceanic ridges. That's where the majority of the water that laid the sediments on this earth came from. And so you have water moving horizontally away, east and west, away from the mid-oceanic ridge. Now, as it's doing this, it's moving and hits the continents. It's moving materials that are in one place on the continent. It's going to deposit them in different places. Water moves in streams, by the way. It can pick up 1 million tons of something in one place and deposit it as a stream or a poolet in somewhere else and be deposited. And at the same time, since we're talking about a cataclysmic event, it disturbed the entire topography of the Earth, okay, the geomorphology. And so it's no problem at all for the flood of Noah to rip up corals from one place and bury them somewhere else, even with salt. I don't see any reason for that. In fact, if that salt is
The salt would have dissolved if it was picking up whole coral reefs and putting it somewhere else. That salt would have dissolved.
If it's rock salt, it's not going to dissolve immediately.
It's not rock salt, though, which is a different type of salt that you were talking about. That has nothing to do with the type of salt I'm talking about.
It's not now, but it
is
and it
not rock salt. Go ahead. Sorry.
Joe, you can't just point your finger at every piece of salt you find in the earth and say it can't have been created by the flood.
I'm not.
Or that it had.
I said specific places.
Or that it had to have been created by thousands of years. As True just pointed out, there are places on this earth that dump lots of salt into the water, oceans.
And I can answer him, but you wouldn't let me answer, which is what I mentioned earlier, by the way.
The point I'm really trying to make is that during the flood of Noah, there would have been massive streams of water moving all over the earth, and a stream of water can be known to pick up one material and deposit it in another place.
And that would have dissolved water. That's not the same type of action that you're talking about, true empiricism. You won't let me answer you.
Joe, here's the thing. It doesn't matter if it was dissolved. It still gets deposited. No,
yes, it does.
If the materials in the water and other materials that the salt is in are buried by other sediments that are coming over behind them and bury them, you could find exactly what you're talking about, created in 5,000 places.
You would see a lot of mud in the area, and you don't.
Mud?
You would see a lot of dried mud amongst the salt in the type of action that you just described.
Sediments. Sediments are not all mud.
They're not, but in the process that you just described, in order to try and explain why this salt is still there, you would see lots of mud and other types of debris from the type of action that
it's buried in sediment.
Listen, here's what true empiricism, what you're describing, is.
I want a little more information. Is this salt pure salt, or is it free of?
No, it's not.
Okay, great. So why?
I gave you a specific formation, by the way, to look up. You haven't looked it up.
Tell me why it can't be that chunks of salt rock was eroded and broken apart as it was moving during the flood and fell in one place and was buried by their sediments. Why can't that have happened, Joe?
Because it's mixed with a bunch of microfossils that are associated with plankton in an inland sea. It also, it has detritus in it. It also has the coral reefs ringed around it, obviously in situ. The way it's very, but I really want to bring, because Troon Pearson brought up a common retort, which I think is a bit more sophisticated than what I'm hearing right now. He brought up the fact that there are clear indications that brine is being pumped out by the ocean. What you're talking about is when brine of a different mixture come into contact with each other, and when the interface is stirred, salt is deposited, and this can happen underwater, definitely. The problem is that this is called it's called a Romp's mechanism. The problem is that in the turbulence, the salt should contain it should contain lots of quarts of mud and other impurities. And in other parts of the salt is relatively pure. The biggest contaminants are evaporate minerals.
May I ask you something really quick?
Well, really clear. The salt
I just want to see whatever you're reading off of. Can you send the link here on the side?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I can check it out.
Yeah.
The one thing that I want to point out is that salt, it consists of sodium and chlorine. That's typically what salt is. It consists of sodium and chlorine, and I believe the brine inside of the ocean floor, methane is involved with that as well. But I understand that the brine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as my research has gone, brine, as it comes from the ocean into the ocean, as it goes into the ocean during the winter season in Antarctica, what basically happens is that helps for the circulation as well in the water. And the phytoplankton and the algal plankton in the ocean, this basically has something to do with that. There's also some effect with chemicals underground that helps to feed the algal plankton and the phytoplankton inside of the ocean as well. But I think that actually kind of fits with a direct sort of objection with what you're saying, because if something were to have happened, some sort of event were to have happened that had to do with this brine, I think it would have affected the phytoplankton and the algal plankton as well, and that might be where you're seeing that in that strata. Correct me if I interpreted what you were saying wrong, because it does seem like that's like something that would fall like perfectly in line with what you're saying.
Well, there's a couple issues with what you're saying. What you're saying, if I recall correctly, you were describing things that were coming out of Antarctica, right? Or you might have said the Arctic Circle. Either case, you're describing things that still require geologic time, because in the areas that I'm talking about, you would have to say that at one point in those areas they were the same type of ecological and environmental area as places like Antarctica or the Arctic Circle. Again, I forget which one you mentioned. The other issue is that there's coral. There are cold water and deep water coral, but those types of coral are not found in the areas that I'm talking about. We're talking about coral that's usually in a shallow area, because coral needs the sun to come down. Coral needs a certain type of temperature range in order to survive. And so that coral shows that it can't be the same type of process that you're talking about. But
well, if you kind of think about it like this, though, if we're talking about a massive flood, even in the deeper part of the oceans, and we're thinking about how the fountains of the deep, they broke open, then where we're looking at this brine, where we're looking at the phytoplankton, if something big enough were to have happened like that, then it's coming up towards shallow ground. Wouldn't it be? I think it would fall in line, if you get what I'm trying to say, because if you're having both of those fall in line with each other with a global flood and everything's getting mixed up, then you can see where the coral would fall in place with this brine as well.
Not in the way that it's mixed with the salt evaporites. The process you just described of the flood mixing things up in a certain way, that mixture is not the same process that where salt can be laid underwater, and that process would have dissolved all this salt. I mean, this is the issue that I'm seeing. We have salt someplace. And you're saying that there's one way that the salt can be accounted for, and that's this mechanism. What is it? Ropes mechanism? But if that mechanism were true, that coral shouldn't be there. And so when we talk about the coral, we talk about how the flood is an event, a catastrophic event that makes everything mixed up crazy. But that makes it so you can't rely on the ropes mechanism anymore. Because if that new catastrophic flood scenario occurred, all of this salt would have dissolved. It wouldn't be there.
I don't get where you're coming from with that. You keep saying that it would the salt would have dissolved.
Yeah,
Why would the
salt is
salt have
water
dissolved
soluble.
if the salt doesn't dissolve? No, I mean we can see hundreds of thousands of tons of salt of brine at the bottom of the ocean, and there's even brine that's being used as circulation in the ocean. So, where is it that you're saying that it's going to dissolve? I think you got lost.
But that's not with the coral that I'm talking about. It's not in with like fully grown coral reefs. Henry Morris calculated that coral reefs grow so many centimeters a year, and so after a couple meters, it's clear that at least 5 years of growth occurred. But we have thousands of meters of this fully grown coral in these areas with this salt. You're not going to find that kind of coral, especially the type of coral that I'm talking about, which is coral that's found in a shallow inlet sea. You're not going to find that kind of coral associated with the mechanism that you just described, the mechanism where we have brine layer deposits flowing around the world. Also,
Joe, you realize that salt was transported during the flood and deposited in that location.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what because you keep on saying that it wouldn't happen, but I'm not seeing where the connection is that it wouldn't happen.
Because
if we have the brine already, I understand that it doesn't happen normally, but if we're looking at a catastrophic event that's affecting the whole planet and everything's getting mixed up like that, then that would make sense.
But the coral would have been destroyed.
The coral would have been buried. What about all the fossils? They weren't destroyed. They were created. You know, sediments bury things in situ, Joe, without destroying them all the time.
Yeah, that kind of burial would have dissolved the
salt was dissolved. That's why it's deposited where it is, Doe.
The salt was dissolved. Well, if the salt was dissolved, it wouldn't be in the several different places that I mentioned.
Water transports all kinds of things without destroying it completely.
Yeah, but water dissolves salt.
Right, and water can move semi-solid salt or salt, heavily concentrated salt in water.
But when you look at that type of salt,
the salt in the ocean, the brine,
and you got solid salt again.
Okay, when you look at that kind of salt, you don't find the type of detritus and impurities that are found in the Salinas salt, in the salt down in Texas, and the salt that is currently being evaporated from the Black Sea today. The salt that's currently being evaporated from Salt Lake City, you don't find that kind of salt in the processes that you guys just described.
Joe, if that was rock salt that got eroded...
someone wants to be unmuted, Westcott.
And deposited in one place, I don't see any reason that the flood of Noah couldn't have done that. You're just claiming that...
I just gave you several reasons, man.
No, I don't see that as a reason why it can't have. Especially if we know that I know that salt is not sand. But, I mean, heck, the flood of Noah transported millions and millions of tons of sand from the Appalachian Mountains area to the American Southwest.
Sand
it formed the...
You're just talking about a different thing in order to...
in Navajo sandstone. I'm talking about water transports things. And I don't see any reason why the flood of Noah can't have transported that salt. You say it's pure...
It's water soluble. You know what water soluble means?
Yeah, how fast did it get? Where was it in the earth before it ended up where it is?
Where did the salt in the earth come from? Is that what you're asking?
No,
it was on inland seas.
Joe,
the inland seas is all the coral.
That's the uniformitarianist's belief, Joe. But that doesn't explain the many salt formations that are in the earth, buried in sediments.
And said that salt can form in several different ways. I agreed with you there. Me and True Empiricism were just talking about a different way that salts form, through Ronck's mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Westcott's back. He probably wants to be broadcast.
So the coral that's found there, I don't see that as an argument against the flood, because the flood would literally bury a lot of coral where it sits, and it would also rip up coral and move it from one place to another and bury it there as well. So
can you see how that's not falsifiable? The flood would do both things, so you can't show that it's wrong.
The fossil records is all kinds of rapidly buried things, and it's got anomalies in it, like that boulder I showed you.
Is it rapidly buried in a water-soluble substance?
Can I put a couple of cents in words here?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
We're talking about the salt. I looked up this. It says evaporates of gypsum and halite rock salt, right? And they're showing the Michigan basin with some reefs and all that. But it's so we're talking about surface salt, though, right? We're not talking about buried salt.
What do you mean by surface salt?
The salt is on top of the surface. It's not under the ground.
No,
that's mixed, right?
That's a different. Can you send me a link to what you're talking about? Some of this salt obviously is exposed. That's how they found it.
I mean, that's the problem is we're trying to.
This is salt. Earlier, Neph asked me where this salt was. Specifically in central Michigan, there are several meters of salt buried a little bit. Thank you for the link, by the way. It's awesome.
Wait, you're talking about the Salinas salt?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the Salinas salt amongst other different types.
Well, now, wait a minute. Let's go back
to what I'm doing when I'm looking at this is I'm seeing from the top a geographic picture here, and what I can tell from it, it looks like that, as it took a while for the sea floodwaters to drain off, and there's a lot of theories about it even taking longer in the North Americans. That's what that looks like. It looks like there was sea, enough sea there for a while for it to build reefs, and then as it drained off, it left the salt behind. And so that doesn't prove or disprove the flood in that particular instance, except it does lean more toward the flood, because that could have happened within a couple of thousand years that nobody was around. That historically they weren't around. I mean, it doesn't take that long. You even said it could take. When you're talking about that,
I know where you're going. Definitely.
You say it would take it. You said it could have been recovered in a couple of days, which
it depends.
That doesn't go outside the flood perimeters either, as it takes several months
not
to completely drain off.
I see where you're going with this, definitely. Not at all if it was found on top, which is, if it was found on top of all the layers that were supposedly laid down on the flood, absolutely, definitely.
But you're saying the salt below underneath the ground is mixed, which is what you said it would be mixed. If this type of salt would be mixed.
It would be
impurities
mixed.
in it, right? And it does have impurities in it, right?
The salt halfway down, is specifically in the Salinas. It's a very good website you posted to, by the way. The salt underneath is the salt I'm talking about, because that's the salt that's in the layers that were supposedly laid down by the flood. And
salt underneath. I mean, I don't know. Could it have salt through or been? But what time of the flood was it laid down? It's not that very deep, is it?
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Israel.
It's not very deep, so I mean it could have been, several months into the flood when it was just mainly surface water swishing back and forth because of the tides. Right?
It was the Solarian? The Solarian depends. It depends on which flood model you're talking about. Some people think that the Solarian and right down to the Cambrian were actually the early days of the flood. Other people think that it was a little bit later. It depends. Some people don't even. It depends on the issue. I'm going with. I believe Neph has a quote on his page that says, "For 1,800 meters down." That's what I'm going with, and this is within the 1,800 meters that he's talking about. But you're definitely right in that there is salt that is higher above, which is, itself can be more of an issue, because how can you have, I mean, if you have one layer, go ahead.
Well, I was reading, when I was looking this up, I was reading some Michigan salt problems that they have ran out of all the surface salt, and then there's all kinds of salt leaking out from underneath.
Mm.
So even from 1,000, it's more likely the flood had to lay down the salt quickly before it had a chance to move on, because even if you're talking about thousands of years slowly building, it wouldn't have had time to accumulate. So even your scenario for thousands of years or millions of years of slowly being laid down,
why would it
have that water melts? You said that water melts the salt. Well, it dissolves in water automatically. Then the slow time would keep it from forming as well, according to your calculations.
Why? I don't.
Because you'd have rainwater and flood water all flowing through there, and it would, as it's doing now, it's seeping out. So, for it to accumulate as large as it did, it would have to have been laid down very quickly.
Okay, I want to point out something, Joe.
I have a response, Westcott, but
giving us a little bit of misinformation here. You said this whole salt deposit is solid salt without any, materials mixed in with it. I'm reading.
Did I say that, everyone? I said detritus and gypsum and microfossils.
You said it's salt. You said it's solid salt. Now that's misleading. And you said it was.
I didn't say that, everyone, and I think that's terrible that you're trying to say I'm being misleading.
You said it's not contaminated with stuff. It was solid salt. But I'm reading from this website about. Yes, you did say that, Joe. We all heard that.
I think you're very. I don't think you're very clear, Joe, with your description of the salt.
No, he said that it was solid salt.
It would not have plastics. It would not have mud. That's
what now I'm talking. Right. You've given us misinformation. You said it was solid salt, and that it was not mixed with impurities. Now I'm going to read for you.
And I told you what the impurities it would not be mixed with.
I'm going to read from you just a little bit from this geology website that describes it. It says the great salt beds, named the Salinas salt beds, were deposited in the basin. In the central part of the basin, 2,300 feet of alternating salt, shale, and limestone beds have been penetrated in the Salinas, with 1,600 feet of rock salt. The salt, let's see here, they say also.
Can you send me a link to what you're talking about?
It's the webpage that Westcott provided.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it also says, now let me go a little bit further down, they say, in the Michigan basin grew until gypsum, amphitrite, and finally rock salt were precipitated on the underlying carbonates. The aggregate thickness of 600 meters of gypsum and salt accumulated in the basin, with one bed of salt nearly 150 meters thick. It would take a column of seawater nearly 1,000 meters deep to form a layer of 600 meter salt. Looks like. Now, great thickness of anhydrite and gypsum are also present. Okay, so now from this I glean two things, very important things. Firstly, you've given us misinformation by implying that this salt, it was solid salt and it was relatively pure salt. You implied it had virtually no impurities in it. What we're actually seeing here is that it's multiple layers of alternating salt and other materials. It's not as you described it, okay? And furthermore, the salt has other materials mixed in with it, and the thickest part of it looks like 150 meters thick of pure salt, so or nearly of contaminated salt actually, which has gypsum and anhydrite in it as well. So it's not as you described.
Which I mentioned all those things, by the way. Okay, so let me continue reading what Neph just said. The very next sentence that Neph doesn't leave that Neph left out is the deposition of this immense volume of salt took perhaps 15 to 20 million years and ended about 300.
That's what you
the
believe.
link I just.
That's what you believe. Now, Joe, hold on. I want to make a point, guys. Hold on. This is really important. One more point. They state in this article it would take a column of seawater nearly 1,000 kilometers deep to form a layer of 600-meter thick salt. So how in the world can it have formed then? See, there's something else that did it. So,
wait, what?
Joe, I think it was disingenuous of you to say that this was nearly pure salt, virtually free of contaminants, and it was solid. And
can I make a bet with you, Neph? I bet you $10 that I didn't say that.
You have completely misrepresented this salt deposit.
$10.
You indicated that it didn't have contaminants in it.
In fact, Joe,
it didn't have. And you specified mud contaminants and another thing, but
that's what I meant. Yeah.
But the way you worded it means that it made us. You were indicating that there were no contaminants at all.
That's right.
Yeah,
the contaminants would all depend on what was being moved by the floodwaters.
In fact,
not necessarily just mud itself, or when the salt began to settle.
Can I explain myself, or no? You guys are talking over me.
Joe,
he's not going to let me explain myself, Westcott.
Joe, in fact, it was so disingenuous of you that I'm going to go back into this Hangout, and later I'm going to extract that part of it where you describe this salt as nearly pure with virtually no contaminants and solid. And I'm going to make a video of it, and I'm going to put it on YouTube.
Even Westcott just said that I explained it. I mean,
I'm going to show that you were disingenuous. Joe, here's what I suggest. The next time you want to debate evolution and creation or geology or even stuff, don't misrepresent the evidence.
I got to ask something.
You can't respond?
I kicked him now.
Where was the location of the this